Um, the radicalism and the novelty of a huge part of it, of Christianity in the West, is that this separation of religion and the secular comes to be completely taken for granted,
Right.
and and it's exported. So it's another of the things, a bit like the dating system, that gets exported by the European colonial powers across the world. And other areas of the world have to kind of come to terms or try and adapt themselves to this understanding. So it happens in India, it happens specifically across the Muslim world. There is nothing in Islam that corresponds to the Western Christian understanding of the secular. The idea that religion is something that exists separate from something called the secular. The idea that Islam is a religion is an entirely Christian one. And so over the period of Western cultural supremacy, Muslims basically had to accommodate themselves to that idea. They could either accept it and kind of start to recalibrate Islam so that it becomes a religion in the Christian sense, or they can violently reject it. But they're still existing in the context of the kind of the cultural global superiority of that Christian idea of the secular. And if you're a Muslim who is coming to a Western country, the strain on you is even greater, because a Western country will grant you freedom of religion, but what it won't do is accept or even acknowledge that you might not want to feel that your world is divided up into the secular and a sense of religion. And what we call Muslim radicals, extreme Islamic radicals, are basically people who want to collapse the whole idea of the secular, who want Islam to permeate and govern every aspect of the state, indeed of the entire world. And this is obviously something that cannot be accommodated within a Western secular state, and particularly not within a state like France, where the idea of the secular is the governing ideological principle of the entire way that people in France conceive of their society and their civilization. So the cartoonists of Charlie Hebdo see themselves as being against equally all religion. They despise it. They see themselves as upholding laïcité, this idea of the secular. But in fact, they are not treating religions equally, because their assumptions are themselves Christian.
Right.
And the abuse that they turn, say, not, I mean, it's not just against Muhammad, it's against the Virgin or Jesus or the Pope or whoever. It's actually very Protestant. You can trace it back, that line of inheritance, that line of tradition in France, back beyond the Enlightenment, back to the Protestant Reformation, and the kind of the violence that was exercised in the Reformation against icons and so on, religious art. So Catholics obviously don't like it, but they're kind of habituated to it. They're used to it. They've had 500 years of it. They understand the rules of the game.
Right.
But Muslims don't.
Right.
To Muslims, it's violently blasphemous in a way that I think French secularists find it very difficult to get a handle on, because French secularists don't want to recognize their own line of descent from the Christian past. And I think that this explains a huge part of why Islam has been peculiarly hard to accommodate within the fabric of Western liberal states, is that Western liberals don't understand the fact that their liberalism and their secularism are themselves culturally contingent.
Right.
They think, of course, the secular just is, like, kind of, dogs exist or trees, but it doesn't. It's a specifically culturally bred way of seeing the world, and there are other ways of seeing it. And you can see this, I think, very clearly in events of the past few years in countries that were colonized, either literally colonized or mentally colonized by the West during its apogee. So India or Turkey, both of which in different ways came to accept that there was something called the secular, and both of which, under Modi in India or under Erdogan in Turkey,
Mhm.
are decisively turning their backs on the idea of the secular, trying to go back to a kind of
Right.
pre-colonial period, try and kind of, in the case of Modi, what he calls Hindutva, an attempt to get back to a world in which what in the West is called Hinduism isn't a religion, but is just, the water in which Indians swim. And
Yeah.
likewise in Turkey, um, a, a, a desire basically on the part of Erdogan to repudiate the secularism that Ataturk introduced when the Ottoman Empire fell and the Turkish Republic was established, and kind of return to an understanding of Islam as something that saturates the entire fabric of the state.